Hi, everyone. My name is Gunjan Sial. I'm Transformation Executive at Emerald Technology Group, Inc. I offer clients strategy, governance, program management services on their transformations. With me today, I have Daniel Zaman. Daniel, first of all, cheers.
Cheers.
Virtual cling.
Yeah,
So Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
sure. So my name is Daniel Zaman. I work for Golfos Technologies, and we're a boutique consulting firm from a security standpoint. And we help our clientele, first of all, assess their security maturity status, and then strategically define ways on how we can take them to the next level.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Daniel. So to kick us off, could you please tell us what transformation means to you?
Yeah, transformation is it means a lot of different things to different people. Every
Mhm.
perspective is new and different. But in my perspective, I think when I talk about transformation with organizations, I typically like to take a step back and define the four main pillars that
Right.
I think are very key within transformation of any organization. And those four pillars are your people,
Mhm.
your process, your technology, and then the last one, but by no means the least, is the culture of the
Right.
organization. When we're typically talking about excuse me, when we're typically talking about these four pillars,
Mhm.
I consider people, process, and technology to be more so the enablers, and then the culture itself becomes the catalyst that
Yes.
helps drive the speed at which the people, process, and the technology are going to perform.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And I definitely agree. When we worked together on our recent transformation at a client, I think it was a
mhm,
retail client, culture
mhm,
definitely played a really big part because it really helped define how people approached the work, how we
yeah,
define priorities, how people process technology all came together, as you said, as a catalyst.
yeah, and it helped us lead to the success of the project
Yes,
in
absolutely.
I guess in a timely fashion.
Yes, because there was a very clear vision around what we were trying to do.
Yeah, and sometimes what I also think, and I think this was our experience when we were working together as well. If you have the right culture in place,
Right.
you're prone to success, but with much I guess limited uh, budget rather than
Mhm.
really throwing money at it,
Right,
right?
absolutely. Yes, it definitely brings a focus to everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Wonderfully put. So, Daniel, having said that, how would you say the role of cybersecurity has evolved on these transformations?
So um, I think the proof is always in the pudding, and when it comes to cybersecurity, it's always about the numbers that we're
Hmm.
talking about. And what I have seen in one of the recent reports that I was reading, it was published by one of the leading security firms, I believe in Toronto.
Hmm.
And what it said was the average or the median dwell time that any of the threat adversaries or threat groups they took they basically stayed within the organization for was about 416 days.
Hmm.
And this is back in 2011. And if
Right.
you look at the same numbers now, the median dwell time has been reduced to 56,
Oh, wow.
which kind of in itself speaks volumes about the kind of transformation work that has been happening within security,
Hmm.
whether it is in the background or the foreground, to drastically help reduce these numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
And one thing that I'm thinking of as you're mentioning these numbers, we've also multiplied or maybe even exponentially accelerated the amount of data, amount of tools that are out there these days.
yeah,
If you compare that to the numbers that you just mentioned, it just
yeah,
shows you how fast these threats are catching up. Um,
yeah. But it also shows us how fast the organizations are uh, standing up their mitigation controls
yes,
to actually
mhm,
neutralize these threats as well, right?
absolutely.
And And that's obviously a good sign from a transformation standpoint, because before what it used to be was security was never the forefront of any
Right.
organization. Was always considered an overhead, just like
It
I
was an
would say.
afterthought, right? It's like, here, give me
eh,
your checklist.
Absolutely. And security was never integrated into any of the
Right.
projects, right? So whether it is you're onboarding a new SaaS solution or whatever it may
Yep.
be, right? People back then never thought about, hey, what's the role of security in all of this? And
Absolutely.
I think as part of transformation for some of the organizations that I've been working with, what we are seeing is there's obviously an increasing trend on how security is being baked into
Mhm.
all of the processes rather
Right.
than being just left out as the icing,
Exactly.
right? And so that for me has been how is how security has been
Yeah.
transforming, and it's a good thing. But you would be amazed on how many organizations are still out there that are I would say either early in their game
Right.
as far as cybersecurity is concerned, or they are most likely plateaued.
Laggards. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the
Yeah.
solutions that they have in place,
Yeah.
and they obviously need some help and some assistance in like a third party coming in and reviewing their processes, and their technology, as well as helping their people to
Yes. I think
get to
that's
the next
very
level.
true, right? It depends on the maturity level of the organization. In my
Hmm.
work, I'm finding as clients are moving more towards cloud AI and some of the enablers of this, like DevOps processes, right?
Hmm.
Now, as you mentioned, security is definitely part of those conversations. But do they think about including them? Because traditionally, in your mindset, you haven't necessarily included security into
Yeah,
those conversations.
and you'd be amazed on sometimes what I've come across is organizations that think that, hey, we have a SaaS solution, or now
Mhm.
our technology tier, or the critical technology tier is sitting out in the cloud,
Right.
that the cloud provider is going to be responsible for the security.
Mm.
Well, reality is in a lot of times that's not the case,
Right.
right? And in case if there is a breach, um, sometimes it comes as a rude awakening that, hey, the security portion, the organization
Absolutely.
itself was supposed to be responsible for it.
That is
So
very
those are
true.
some, yeah, and those are some of the key things that we as security professionals help enlighten the organizations with, right?
Right.
So that they understand what their risks are. And
Yes.
just because they're hosting something in the cloud doesn't mean that, hey, somebody else is going to be taking care of their problems.
Right. And at the same time, there's a lot of integrations in place, right? All the way across.
Yeah,
Could be various cloud, multi-cloud, that type of an environment, or it could be cloud integrated with on-prem for that matter.
yeah,
There's many different permutations and combinations. It really depends on what your tech stack is and how
sure.
to make that secure holistically.
Absolutely. And every situation is going to be different. So it's
Right,
not a
right.
cookie cutter solution by any means.
Agreed.
Whenever we are going in, or any of the organizations that I've worked with, what I find is there's always, like, no two organizations are ever going to be the same, right? So
Right,
we always have to, based on our experience and the expertise that we bring to the table, is
right,
for us to go and identify those loopholes for the organizations and help them define a strategic path moving
right.
forward on how they can cover those.
So very much of a gap analysis from that point of view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
having said that, though, we know that every client needs would be slightly different from the other.
Hmm.
But what are key 4 or 5 things or 3 or 4 things that you would say are guidelines for approaching cybersecurity in this case?
Sure. So I'll I'll give you a couple of examples. The Some of the main objectives that we bring forward with us whenever we go into an organization to do some work with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is uh, the first one is that we need to do an assessment initially,
Right.
right, and see how exactly are they handling the security of their within the entire organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just a certain set of people that are handling everything? Or is it that the organization as a whole takes responsibility for the data and the
Right.
processes that it's running, right? And this is something very instrumental, because And there has been some cases. Actually, just this month there was one case study that I was looking at, and it was out of Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a web server that was not completely protected, and as a result, I think close to 67,000, or there was a couple of thousand records
Oh, wow.
with user information that were
Mm,
breached,
right.
right? So that's why I say that one of the first things that we like to explain to the organizations is any organization is how do you security is not a centralized process. It has to be
Right.
decentralized. So everybody needs to own a piece of their security or a chunk of their security, right? So once you're able to do that, the next step that we typically look at, and this is assuming that that there is a good security foundation already present within the
Right.
organization, right?
And what
So
would that foundation look like? If you can give us an overview of what does that look like?
sure. So they need to have, without getting too much into the details,
Right.
they need to have a certain amount of governance
Mm,
set around their internal processes, right? Um, Things like having access control,
right.
right? And ensuring that there are reviews being done on those access control, right? Those kind of
Right.
things are already in place. They should be already doing monitoring for their third-party vendor risk,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
So there has to be an assessment that's done for that.
Mm-hmm.
That they're doing security awareness training with their users, right?
Right.
That's a very key component, I would say,
Yeah.
especially given the date and like the days that we're living in now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you look at a lot of the tactics and techniques that our adversaries are using, right? Typically, they will start off with a phishing email. So if people
Right.
are not able to handle those, and if their credentials get leaked, then obviously it's an issue, and it doesn't contribute towards having a strong security base within the
That is
organization.
wonderful. Yes.
So those are just some of the things that we need to ensure that are in place already,
Mm-hmm.
and then based off of that, that's when we start building up to the next level,
Great.
right? So the next level would be once we know that there is that they have a strong security foundation, that they redefine their security, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what that includes is me being the security person, I may not know all the confidential or the important data or critical data that you're working with, right?
Right.
So that's why I need some form of contribution from you being the user, right?
Right.
And once you're able to identify what exactly critical data means, once that definition for what critical data is, that has been laid down, I
Right.
guess those are some of the fundamentals that help us
Mm-hmm.
build better security, right? Um, One of the things that I very firmly believe in, and is that, you know, that old saying that goes, finding that needle in the haystack.
Right.
And in my early days, whenever I used to hear that, I'm like, oh gosh, how are we going to find that needle, right? But that concept is a little misconstrued, because it was never about the needle; it was always about the size of the haystack.
Right.
So if you're able to reduce the size of the haystack, now you may have only 3 or 4 strands of hair within which you need to find the needle. Right?
That's fair.
So,
Yeah.
so the same concept applies towards security within organizations. If you know the 5 or 10 key pieces of data or
Yeah.
information that you need to secure, then you still need to secure all the other assets and all the other, whether it is data assets or endpoint assets
Mm-hmm.
within the organization. But now your focus is on much more pure things, and you'll be able to better
Right.
secure them, right? But for that, we need input from the user base, and we need them to be thinking about it constantly. Hey, if
Right.
there's a new form of data that we are ingesting, does that fall under our critical data asset or not?
Right.
Right?
So having proactive conversations as opposed to more reactive after the fact.
True. And one of the concepts that we like to float within the organizations is security awareness training,
Right.
but we define it as security awareness 2.0.
Right.
Because now it is not just a matter of letting the user know that, hey, you need to protect yourself against any of the emails or phishing attempts that are coming your way, right? Because those may be just for credentials. And while that is equally important, we also need to train our
Right.
users and educate them on what critical data, what the definition of that
Right.
critical data is, and how much of the data that they're using falls under that definition.
Right. And
Right?
that's part of
Because
empowering the user themselves, right? To start thinking
absolutely.
about it from the point of view of, here's my IT department just securing me. From
Hmm.
that point of view to, it's also my job. Security is also my job, not just my IT department's job, which was traditional view.
Yeah, and this ties back to our original concept of transformation, which is the
Right.
culture.
Right.
Right? It's something that needs to be built into the culture.
Right.
So that takes care of our security awareness 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the third thing, which is very important for us, and we help organizations with, is helping them reduce the risk
Mm-hmm.
as well as reduce the cost of security within the organization.
Right.
So to give you an example, I was recently there was an opportunity, and I was looking at all the security tooling that the organization had, and I was able to build an opportunity where we helped the organization save about close to, I think, $120,000
Mm-hmm.
from their yearly budget,
Yeah.
just by helping them consolidate on some of the tooling that they had. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes what I find is organizations, and especially organizations that have some sort of compliance requirements, they
Right.
may go and they will spend a lot of money on tooling, and not realizing that, hey, there's already software within the organization that can help them achieve the same compliance levels,
Right.
but now with less tooling. And what that also in turn helps the organization is that um, it's less of an administrative task, because now
Mm-hmm.
there's one less thing to manage.
Right.
Right?
The governance
So
becomes
you're
more simplified. Yeah.
yeah, and in this way, the governance becomes more certain simplified, and you have your security engineers and your security personnel better able to focus on the
Right.
things that they have on their plate, right? So
That is very true.
yeah, so it's like it's a little bit of effort and a little bit of oversight that needs to be provided to the organizations that helps them both save cost as well as help them
Reduce
improve
the
on their
risk.
security, their
Yeah.
focus on security.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for walking us through that. So
Yeah.
one thing I've been wondering is, we are right in the middle of COVID-19 at the moment. We're
Hmm.
practicing social distancing, right? Um,
Yeah.
and many organizations, depending on their maturity level and all the things that you just mentioned, for various reasons, have been hit differently.
Yeah.
So in your point of view, how has security, or has it changed at all? The role of security, given that we're all remote now, whereas most of the people, yes, there would be times when you work remotely, but usually it would be pretty consolidated,
Yeah.
the work efforts.
So I'll share an example with you.
Hmm.
Think about it this way: like within the security practices, one of the main things is an organization needs to be able to patch their systems.
Right.
Right? So if it is Microsoft patches, they need to go out on a regular basis.
Right.
Um, but given the situation we have right now, typically what would happen is the patching is done once the all the assets are connected locally on the domain
Right.
within the organization. So how would you handle a situation like that,
Remote
given
patches,
that
yeah.
yeah, so now the assets are not connected, and some people may say that, oh, we can have them connect through, like, say, their VPN
Hmm.
and then do the patching that way. But it's not a sustainable thing, because there are a lot many other factors that play into if you're going to be doing patching over VPN, right?
Right.
So one of the key considerations for us is your when we are recommending tooling, or we are going and selecting a tool for doing the various tasks within the organization, especially from an endpoint perspective,
Right.
you need to you need to you need to be you need to be considering these situations at that point when you're actually doing your tooling selection,
That is very true.
So there are tools that are available which can do a fantabulous job, but patching can only be done within the confines of the organization.
Right.
But how would you deal with a situation like this?
Yeah. So I
Right.
think this is where your business continuity plan comes into play as well, right? I had a recent
Mm-hmm.
conversation with Mary about that. So these are the type of things that either at those key points, as you mentioned, during your governance, whether it's monthly, quarterly, 6 months, at whatever point in time, when you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at your state of your organization, your assets, your transformation for that matter,
Yeah.
to look ahead and plan for them, right?
Yeah.
From that point of view. And as you mentioned, tooling is a big part of that. The tools that you choose need to enable that, not discourage that.
Yeah. And I think it's a quote out of Dale Carnegie's book, Begin with the End in Mind.
Right.
Right.
Yep.